I'm Maureen Ballatori, and this is Spilled Salt, a podcast on the thrills and spills from the food, beverage, and agriculture industries. Today's guest is Will Blum. He is the creator of Bluebird Hardwater, which is the original beverage made with only real spirits and pure water. So they have vodka and water, whiskey and water, and tequila and water, as well as some other new products coming out on the market soon. Many of our guests that we have on the podcast are talking that are related to food and beverage CPG, are talking about scaling. And I really wanted today's focus to be more about Will's experience with the launch of Bluebird and their products. And so we focused the conversation there, and it was absolutely fantastic. So he talks about what it takes to launch, as what specifically in the alcohol industry too, which has some of its own complications, but also what some of his scaling experience has been like too. Enjoy the conversation. Hey, Will, how are you?
Hi, thanks for having me, Maureen.
Yeah. Glad to have you join us today. So I would love for you to kick us off like we always do. Tell us a little bit about the career path before getting to the work that you're doing now.
Yeah, I guess I can touch on it a bit. There's not much career path for me because this is really my first venture out of college. But before that, I grew up under an entrepreneur dad, really like just a kind of a serial entrepreneur, and knew that was something I wanted to do. I got a lot of exposure in that and a lot of different industries. And then I went to school at Pepperdine in Malibu, a really small school. And I really was kind of searching around for what I wanted to start. And I just kind of stumbled across like this idea for, just through talking with friends and kind of having a similar problem that I was having, just this idea for an alcoholic water. And we looked around and nobody was doing it. And that was kind of what I was always taught, is do stuff that no one else is doing. And we hopped on it right away and just started making little samples for our friends, seeing if it had any kind of pull.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yes, you're right. It is, they say that you find the problem, right? And then especially if it's something that you can resonate with, and then solve that, as opposed to kind of working from the opposite. Sometimes we experience early stage startups that have a solution and they're trying to find a market, right? They're trying to find what industry does this fit into. Whereas I think you're right. I think you naturally find some more traction when it's the other way around. So what is Bluebird Hardwater, and why did you want to launch it, other than the fact that it was a problem that you could solve for yourself and your friends?
Yeah, I think I really wanted to launch it because I just saw the really big thing was I saw this huge white space in the alcohol industry. And I think what really sparked my interest in the space was how repetitive everything is. And I think people say there's a lot of innovation nowadays in the space, but coming from other industries like tech and something that I've seen before, like the alcohol industry is way less kind of like outside the box, or way less like, even it's not as innovative as I think it comes across and a lot of people talk about nowadays with the RTDs. Because when I looked at a shelf, everything, what my really big problem was, and what a lot of my friends' problem was, when you go from a light beer, that I would feel really sluggish and bloated and just full for days. Like, it would affect me so badly for so long. I had a couple friends that would have the same problem. And then I saw the seltzer industry kind of come out and the RTD space come out. And I didn't see a difference between, they were still bubbly, they were still sugary. For me, they almost affected me worse. I saw an attraction for people wanting lighter beverages through that kind of like growth. But I really thought there was not much difference between like a light beer and a seltzer. I thought they were almost, to me, they made me feel the exact same, and they didn't fix any of the problems that I was dealing with, like how I felt while drinking or how I felt the next day. Yeah, and we really stumbled upon this idea, and it was like we were talking one night, and we were like all holding a bottle of water, and all of our parents have taught us to have a drink and then have a bottle of water with every single drink. We were like, a light beer is light enough where you could do that in one can, but you don't, because you have all these added ingredients, all these preservatives. And we were like, why does nobody do that?
Yeah. And I want to say that there was a beverage that I encountered at the Fancy Food Show a number of times over the last handful of years. I think they're called, I want to say Water Boy, but that's not it. That's like a powdery it's Sunset or something along those lines. I'll have to look it up and update it in the transcription for this. But it's a alcoholic beverage made with coconut water.
Okay.
And so Sun Boy, that's what it was. I recall talking to them at the booth at the show that they had said that they couldn't claim that it was actually going to hydrate you because the alcohol is dehydrating you. So what are you able to say or claim with respect to hydration and the water component?
Yeah, like we can't. The TTB protects against making like health claims, so I can never like. And this
Right.
drink isn't healthy; it's still alcohol at the end of the day. But if you were gonna drink, it is the cleanest way to drink. And if you look at like the pure, I forget the pure stats of it, but if you drink like what we have in the can is about a shot of alcohol. It's about 1.5 ounces of 40 proof alcohol if you boil it down, and
Mm-hmm.
through that you lose about I think it's you lose about 25 milliliters of water, and then our product has almost double that. Like it's you're replenishing that in more, but we can't really go and claim those things or go and
Gotcha.
those things. But you are in this sense, especially taking out all the preservatives, you are gaining your water back in more. But if you did drink them for long periods of time, you would net lose. If you were like drinking for many hours, you would eventually
Yeah,
point where it like you start losing.
sure.
Yeah.
So how does Bluebird compare to something like a leading high noon on the market?
Yeah, I think we're the biggest thing is the no bubbles. I think that was a big thing for me, just getting away from the bloated feeling. I don't reach for a bubbly water when I'm really thirsty or like it's hot outside or I'm like even when I'm like at a bar or something, it's you're kind of like you're out and you're having fun and you're like you're dancing and stuff. I want something that feels like it's hydrating me, and I just felt like everything in a can. I was like I don't reach for bubbly stuff when I feel like even when I'm on the beach, I don't reach for golfing. Everyone reaches for light beer, but I just don't like that bubbly feeling when I want something hydrating and refreshing. That's the biggest difference. And then just how clean our product is. Um, I don't know when you go into high noon. I know they really push the real vodka, real juice aspects, but they also have
Mhm.
a list of ingredients beyond that. And we really push, having no sugar in our drink. They have sugar. We really push the no carbs. Ours is all about being really clean and not having those preservatives in there, not having anything to weigh you down because we went through a long, lengthy process actually of just developing a way to manufacture this. And
Mm.
I had to find somebody that was capable of even developing something like this without preservatives. So it was really never had really been done before, and that's really our biggest, another really big difference for us is just how clean the beverage is.
Yeah, and actually, I'm glad that you just took us there because that's one of the things that I want to talk about. So, Bluebird is vodka and water, there's a whiskey and water, and there's a tequila and water. Let's talk about what the R&D looked like in terms what was it like for you to find a manufacturer? Tell me about the R&D from idea, right, to I think I'm going to do this to let's do
Yeah,
this. Like tell me about those very early stage in terms of finding manufacturing and getting your first product on the market.
yeah. I mean, early stage for me was incredibly overwhelming. It's actually really hard to find co-packers. If you're not in the alcohol industry, it's hard to get into the alcohol industry, and just there's not a lot of info on Google. I mean, even from 3 years ago to now, there's a lot. A lot has changed in the canning industry because people are asking for cleaner stuff. So there is a lot more you can find on it. You can Google stuff now, and you can find great manufacturers. But back then, it was just a lot of hunting for people that had been in the industry. Like if I knew somebody that had been in the tequila industry, I just tried to call all my contacts to
Mm,
find somebody. And actually, eventually, which I think would be great advice for other entrepreneurs, is just contact a lawyer, like one of the top lawyers in that field, and he'll pass you to the right people. I think that's just by accident. I was talking to them because of like our formulation and stuff. You already have to talk to a lawyer when you're getting into the alcohol space. And I was looking around for a lot of them, and I just found a guy that was amazing that connected me with a lot of different manufacturers. But from there, it did get harder because
that is excellent advice. Just to like put a point to that before you move on. I don't want people to miss that when they're listening. That is incredible advice.
yeah,
Call the leading attorney or in any aspect, right? If it was like, okay, I need legal, call the leading attorney and say, who is best for me at my stage? There's no one better to make that recommendation.
yeah,
That's
that took me
incredible.
6 months to figure out. So
Yeah.
that's a big like that'll save a lot of time. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Continue.
Yeah, and then we got really I don't know, developing a new drink that never been done before. Like even though it's just vodka and water, seems so simple, and it was not simple at all. I think that's where like it really started progressing for us to the point where we thought it might not even be possible at one point, and that's where it gets a little harder for our story than I think a lot of people's story.
From the
And
manufacturing standpoint was where it was getting difficult.
yeah, from the manufacturing standpoint, so we produced and we couldn't get it stable, the drink stable. We wanted a year-long shelf life. We couldn't get stable, and I really didn't want to compromise and put in preservatives, preservatives or anything else, or take any like shortcuts to it. So I started looking at alternatives, and I got really lucky. I met a great formulator in the industry that had been working at Diageo for 20 plus years, and he wanted to leave and open up his own practice. And I just got really lucky while I was looking. I actually was searching for other co-packers um, in the meantime that like could possibly manufacture something this clean, and
Mm-hmm.
really looking for the cleanest facility possible to make something that's super shelf stable because there's no preservatives and there's just two ingredients. And at the same time, I was coming across a lot of articles about yeah, like the growth of canned water. And my drink is probably most similar to a canned water space.
Right.
And I found out then too, like some of the top canned water people, like Liquid Death, they weren't producing in the US at the time
Right.
because they couldn't find a plant that could can water. And that blew my mind. I was like, that, like, I didn't see that problem coming, that canning water was more
Mm-hmm.
difficult than canning a soda or, you know,
Yeah.
hardest things to can just because it's so not shelf stable. And you need a really clean way to do it. And it just, everything in the US was around bubbles and sugar and stuff on canning lines. It was never around water. But since I think that growth of Liquid Death and everything, they are now canning in the US, and there is facilities that can can water. And during that time, I saw a couple of facilities coming on the map that could can water, and I went to them. And that's really how it started. But even going to them, we still had to develop a way for we still had to come up with a unique system to get the shelf stability on it. And that was the longest lead time. It was
Hmm.
I would say a year just in development on how can we make this actually exist. And you know, maybe it's not even possible, which we thought was that was scary for a minute when we were like, this might not actually even be possible to make. Um, and then another really big roadblock we ran into was you have to submit your formula to the government. And we submitted vodka water, and it's just vodka and water, and we got denied. And I couldn't figure out why. And this is probably why it had never been done before in the space. Was maybe it was also there's a roadblock there.
Ah.
So that's actually how I ended up hiring the alcohol lawyer who ended up passing me to my first co-packer. Was I couldn't believe, I was like, why can't I make vodka water? I see High Noons, I see these other places that are doing vodka soda,
Mm-hmm.
and the ruling was that you can't make vodka below 40% without adding some sort of ingredient, like adding a flavor or adding a that
Hmm.
was that was the rule that they had in the U.S. TTB alcohol system, was that you can't go below 40% unless you add a flavor. And I was really anti adding flavors or anything.
Yeah.
So I kind of went back and forth with them for probably 6 months on the subject until they finally allowed me to make the drink. I finally got approved, and then I submitted the tequila and whiskey one right after that.
Mm-hmm.
That's when I knew we really were the only people making tequila, whiskey, and vodka at that 4 to 5% level.
Mm-hmm. So what was the change? What happened to make you be able to get approved?
It was just a
You were
lot of
just a
talking.
squeaky wheel and they just decided
6 months of
there's
just talking to them and not budging. I think that was really it.
wow.
Yeah. And then just someone really wanted to. There's so many different people in TTB. It was just one
Yeah.
person finally wanted to hear my case out, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it was like one guy finally listened to me and he approved me. Yeah.
Yeah. It's so funny how that happens. We work with products that are regulated with clients on projects that are regulated by FDA, some USDA, and in many cases it is all about who you get, you know? And so we can advise on the guidance and follow the guidance, and we work with a third party consultant actually to like gut check us from a, you know, risk management standpoint. It's always great to have an outside party weigh in on that, but none of it's a guarantee because it's so subjective based on how the rules are being read that day, if you will.
Yeah, and it also that's where it gets like definitely scary in this industry, is having those things, because one person can approve it, and then you go to Florida and try to get a separate approval, and then you get denied, and you're like, and then you have to go back and do it all again.
Right.
So that's also something that we really like look at seriously too. Is not only can you pass the government level, but you need to be able to pass the state level.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
that's what I learned early on, of just like, if you submit to the government, also just submit to a couple states to make sure your labeling is also good there.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So from the time where you decided I'm going to do this and I'm going to start pursuing it to the time where you had your first product in package, what was that timeline like?
It was probably around a year and a half,
Mm-hmm.
maybe pushing a little more closer to 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and that's just the industry itself with being, and I think that's almost an expedited timeline for inventing something new. I was
Mm-hmm.
really wanting to get this. I just thought it was such a white space, and I was like, I really want to do it before anybody else does. So I felt like I was really pushing to do it
Mm-hmm.
faster. Um, but yeah, so I think that's really pushing hard for a year and a half to get it done. If you're inventing something new in the space, I think that's going to be as quick as you can possibly move. Once you've
Yeah.
done it before, and once you've been in the industry before, you can turn around a product, and if a well tested one in a year, which is what we just did actually currently for our new products coming out this summer. But
Mm-hmm.
um,
Anything you can tease about those?
yeah, they're, I think, really everything that I've learned in the last like 3 years of being in the beverage space and learning the industry and just working 24/7 in a startup and also inventing a new product. I think I took all of that knowledge, everything we learned from our customers, because we saw that they liked the white space, and we just asked them. I think that's also something really important for entrepreneurs. It's just like, I always tell my employees, like, don't get stuck and like love the product. Like, always be willing to like listen to the consumers and make improvements. Like, everything can be better. And I
Mm-hmm.
think a lot of people get like this love for the product. I think they should have more love for the company and the brand, and be willing to listen to the consumers on what they're asking for in the products. And that's really what we did. We rushed it to market, like we did in a year and a half and 2 years, just to see what.
Mm-hmm.
That was something I took from my dad. Was just the entrepreneur side was always fail fast, like get into market and just see what the consumers are telling you right away. And we
Mm-hmm.
saw this large white space that people really liked the drink, and we were like, okay, this is amazing, and we were like flying high on it, and we were like, this is great. And then consumers just came back and kept asking for flavor and flavor and flavor.
Ah.
Knew that flavor was going to be tough because I didn't want to compromise on the preservatives. So my whole thing was like, oh, just make like add whatever flavoring you want. And a lot of people would do that. A lot of our main customers that were repeat customers were always adding flavor.
Yeah.
And then so I reached out to the same developer that was able to develop my first drinks, and I was like, I really want to make a clean, real juice version. Do you think we could do it?
Mm-hmm.
Especially with all the new technology coming out in the canning industry, we both kind of thought we could do it, and we spent about 6 months doing that. And then beyond that, I think we went really above and beyond. I really asked him. I got to like, instead of just focusing all on how to make the product, which was my first go, I got
Yeah.
to have hands off on making this one and really like rely on the experts that I had kind of ran into in the industry, let them develop the products. I was able to sample it, like stuff that took me 3 months in the past would take me a day. And then that was what's
Mm-hmm.
great. Space, and when you learn as an entrepreneur, you can start getting things much easier. And we went more intensive with that. We developed consumer studies around the packaging, since it was a new category, a new type of product. How do we want consumers to interpret that on the shelf and have it differentiate itself? So we did a consumer study on not only the package design, but the liquid, um, all the way through kind of the experience of where you'd want to find it in a shelf. And I think that was really what sets us apart in this new launch, is how heavily tested the branding is. The every word is thought of on the packaging. Like, every word is
Yeah.
purposefully there, and it's all through just what the consumers and our customers were wanting to be seen and translated to them. And we really used our current product as a benchmark. We compared the two, and we were like, what do you guys like about our current packaging? What do you not like about it? And what would be better with these new products? And also at the same time, do you prefer the unflavored or the flavored version?
Mm.
And even with our current, we did one just with our customers that love the brand and just would come back and get it all over and over again. And even 90% of them preferred the flavored. So
Hmm.
that's when really we were like, okay, even our repeat customers are really asking for flavors. So that's when we dove in for the
Yeah.
flavored versions.
Wow. When will those be available? Because I see that you're in many of the liquor stores in Florida, Tennessee, and New York, and then you're available online to ship to a number of other states as well, right? So when will this new product be available?
Yeah, it'll be available in July. And yeah, we're really excited too. The other thing I think that's great about the products that I should touch on too, that's really important, I think, for entrepreneurs is we asked a lot of our retailers, like, what do they see selling and what do they see, what's working for them on the marketing side. So also what I really love about this one and what really helps us with this new launch is we worked with a lot of retailers on what they prefer. Like they want variety pack or they want an 8-pack or they want slim cans right now. And I think by doing that and looping them in on the development process, which I think anybody could do even earlier on, just like loop in, you know, anyone that you're close with at any chain store and just like get their eyes on it, because now that we've developed it with chains, we'll be able to like we'll be able to get in the chain much easier.
Right.
That's always the biggest roadblock.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great advice. One of our former podcast guests was Alicia Albinder Kamak from Hudson River Fruit Distributors, who spent a number of years in retail as a produce buyer. And so when their apples, and so when they were creating and launching a new line of apples, which they're called Little Honeys was the first one. So small Honey Crisp. She did that in collaboration with Trader Joe's. So, hey, this is what we're thinking. What do you think, before launching it, right? And then when it was available, it was pulled in, of course, by Trader Joe's, did so well that they expanded it to 6 more SKUs and additional retailers and everything, right? So that's great when you have the opportunity to get the retailer's ear in that way and have that back and forth conversation to say, here's what I'm thinking. Do you have a preference in these areas that'll help you with directional changes to improve it in those early stages? So as you spent 18 months to 2 years getting the product out there, I think I'm glad that you shared that, because I think sometimes there's a perception that, hey, I'm an entrepreneur too. I started Agency 29, and especially in the early days, and even now, you want to go fast,
Yeah.
right? And so there's something to be said for the slowness that comes in those very early days sometimes, where you're just waiting for, feedback and regulatory compliance, depending on the industry and that sort of thing. And the consumer feedback studies that you're talking about, the actual manufacturing of the product. Let's talk capital. What does that look like for you? I mean, are you self-funded? Did you seek VC capital? Talk a little bit about the financials behind launching the company and what that was like for you.
Yeah, I've been fortunate not to have to go out to funding, especially in 2024. I know it's rough out there for
It is.
and getting startup capital. I think that's I knew I was in a beneficial spot with having a dad that's been an entrepreneur for years and getting advice from him and being able to bring him in on the company and help us grow it in an effective way where we don't burn too much capital. But I also think, looking at the industry, I think it's really important to know, if you're looking at getting into this space, that barrier to entry in alcohol industry is as high as it gets. I think that's like something that I didn't like. I think that's something that people need to consider looking in the space, because I don't know any other industry where you have to hire lawyers and you have to go through formulation and they have to go through, minimum order quantities that are huge on cans.
Right.
And it's a very daunting industry to take on. And I think that's a big thing, is the barrier to entry. And I think that's why there's only 4 or 5 companies that control the entire industry. And I think they're going to get stronger and stronger, just because the barrier to entry is incredibly difficult in the alcohol space. And I hope it changes. But yeah.
Yeah, I think with any industry, though, I mean, yes, you're right. However, I think one of the things that we're also seeing in the whole greater landscape of the food and bev industry is that those startups that are able to push through and innovate and launch and scale, those are the ones that are being acquired by larger companies, right? Because they can't move in that nimble, quick, fast as a bunny, right? Because they're behemoths, they're the elephants, so you can run laps around their little feet, right? And then it just different approach.
Going off of that, I think that's something that really sparked one of my, I had a conversation recently with one of my friends who was opening up his own business. And I kept telling him, he kept calling me, and I kept telling him to stop pretending like a big company. He kept pretending like a big company. And I was like, don't pretend like that. He's like, don't you do that? Like, don't you want to be? I was like, no, the reason that people or big companies buy you is that you're a startup. Like you need to act like a startup. It always, I think, as long as you can ride the startup, like you're a startup, ride it. Like that's what you
Yeah.
need. You need to tell all your employees that you're a startup. You're not in this corporate. That is exactly how you win, is being a startup. I think a lot of people think they need to act like they're this big operation
Mm-hmm.
and like pretend to be big, and it's like, no, do the opposite. Like let people know you're a startup, bring them in. The
Yeah.
reason you're going to win is you're a startup. The reason, if you're acting like a big company, you're not going to beat them.
Yeah, and I think the other side of that too is people love to help the little guy. It's David and Goliath. They want to support this is my company. I bootstrapped it. I scaled this personally. I figured this out. I am passionate. My team is passionate. You want to support that.
Yeah. And every meeting, if you're buying cans or buying like, ingredients or going to co-packers, every meeting should end with, "Hey, I'm a startup. Like give me like the best thing you can, like just like remind them that." I think that's always important. Like I do that with every new person I'm either doing a deal with. I think just remind them that you're a startup, and normally that deal that they send you, the first draft, is going to be a lot more obtainable than than what it would be. Now I always try to
Right.
finish my meetings with, "Hey, just so you know, I am a startup." So
Yeah. Yeah. It's great advice.
yeah.
So for my last question here, I'm gonna hit you with a double.
Okay.
I would love for you to tell me about a high point and a low point from your last handful of years scaling the brand.
High point, I guess, buying the first product off a shelf. That was really cool. Especially because it was in New York City, which I never could have fathomed it being in New York City. I'm from Wyoming, so I'm from the complete opposite of New York City. I could never fathom launching in the city or living in the city. But that was really cool just to see it be like in like like one of the business capitals of the world. Just where you're
Yeah,
buying a product off a shelf. Um,
that's awesome.
yeah, I guess that's tied also too with like, seeing it run on the manufacturing line was amazing. And then also like seeing it in the first like big retail store. That was really cool. Just, it was actually
Mm-hmm.
easy. That was just cool to see it in a big grocery store. Low point, there's a lot as an entrepreneur. To be honest. uh, I don't know. I think getting to, I don't know what the biggest low point is. There's so many, because I think like getting denied by TTB and not, I think really not thinking, like having, I think two things. Like one of the biggest like things I would go back and change is, I think like every person in this space should know that you can go as small as you want to start. And I think the smaller
Mm-hmm.
the better. Like you can test it in 3 local stores, like 3 of your local grocery stores. Just do that. Like don't go too big. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that's kind of the biggest things that I think we did. That's like that won't never affect your sales. You can always go make more product. I know there's minimum order quantities at these manufacturing facilities, but it's always you search around for someone who's willing to make you a test run, and then put it
Mm,
in 3 stores. And I think that would be kind of my initial way, because you can figure out so much about customers just in those 3 stores and really develop
right.
a final iteration of your product quicker.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then probably the low point for me, like on the actual brand, was probably just getting to a point where we had not done that, and we had invested in cans, invested in all this, and we thought, hey, maybe this isn't possible. Was the conversations we were having with our developer. That was probably
Oh,
the scariest time of like, oh wow, like I did go out and buy cans and
yeah,
that'll be possible.
right. Right. And so, but I think also as an entrepreneur, right, you continue to plow through. It's like, okay, I've got this inventory.
Yeah.
I'm going to do something with it. Either my product's going in that can or I can sell the can to somebody else, right? There's solutions to every problem. And I think that may be, if I can like make this assumption, I wonder if it's sort of hard for you to put your finger on a low point, because as an entrepreneur, as somebody who's scaling and figuring it out along the way, you turn every minor hiccup into, the next solution, right? Because the next solution is just around every corner, and you've got to figure out the path. I also totally agree with your deep before wide philosophy, right? Of like, go deep into a handful of retailers before you try to be in every single one of those stores. I just had a conversation with somebody about that yesterday, launching a line of artisanal cheeses that had an opportunity in front of a big retailer. And I said, just make sure that you know what you can handle, so if you don't have to go into every store out of the gate, maybe you suggest 3 or 5 local stores in your region that you can start with and see how those go to give you confidence for the rest of the chain.
Even as you grow, exactly. Even as you grow, I think I've gotten great advice from like some people that I've brought in to help me. Like now that I'm able to afford employees and stuff, I think they've really told me that. Right when we first started, I was very much like, if Publix offered me 200 stores, I was going to take all 200.
Yeah.
And right away when I first made like a sales hire, he was like, no, we're going to take the top 30 and just like focus on those 30. And it's like, I think every startup is going to, like, the founder is going to want to jump on the 200 stores and be like, yeah, for sure. Why would we not do this? But I think that was great advice I got, was like, no, let's just look at the data. Where would be the best 30 stores for our products? And then just start there.
Mm-hmm.
And like the same thing with marketing. Like if you're like in LA and you're thinking about just market in LA, even if you're an e-com brand, I think just market, show that you can do something in one city really well.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree. End us with a piece of advice for listeners, anybody who's looking to start or scale CPG. I
think the best advice is just learn from it. Just like you said, learn from every single mistake. I think, like I mentioned earlier, I was able to make a new product and able to make it everything that I've learned, I was able to bring into it. And because of that, our product will be so much stronger going into the summer. And I think just take every single fail point as like a lesson. I think it's always hard to do as a founder because you get hit with so many different fail points, and you might for a while. But I think I've tried to really always, either get out of the office. I like to surf, so get out of the office, do something that you like, and just remember that it's like a good time to learn and not do that again. And also don't not fix problems. I think that's what a lot of people get stuck in, is just they don't fail fast. Just if it's not working, don't try and make it work. I think as a startup, and I think this advice might sound like it doesn't, I don't know a better way to say it, but I always tell people, be lazy. It's not it's not about obviously you're going to be working 24/7 if you're a startup founder, but it's just find the path of least resistance. I think that's where a lot of people don't do. And that's what I always remind myself, what is the laziest way to do this? It might sound kind of bad, but you are working 24/7, you're a startup founder, but what is the laziest way to do this that's going to be effective? And that will be it's really what's the simplest way to do something, I guess is the best way to say it. But I think really what I try to remind myself, that's the way I tell myself. And don't feel bad. I used to feel bad about kind of being I worked so hard to do this, to be a founder, but I used to feel bad about passing it off to somebody or not manning the ship on that one. And I think that's where I really try to remind myself, it's okay to pass it along and kind of be what it feels like to me as being lazy, even though it's not. But
you mean delegating tasks?
Yeah, delegating tasks. Yeah.
Yeah, it's what is the path of least resistance? I call it, a lot of my work is, new business development. And so sometimes, there's highs and lows to that process too. And so I ask myself, what's the low hanging fruit, right? What is the thing that I can do right now that's going to make an impact on my larger goals? And so if you're thinking in that way of you can be nimble, you can be the bunny, and you can also, still keep the ship moving forward. So great advice.
Hard. So
what's that?
I said transitioning into that, it's always hard, but I think that's what every entrepreneur has to go through. And I think the other piece of advice I would have that I wish I learned early on is I think don't be afraid to make changes with people in your company early on. I think that was something that scared me in the beginning. And I think some of the best changes I've made are the people in my company.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. You have shared some excellent advice on today's episode. I really appreciate you taking the time. Will is one of the few folks that I didn't have a pre-existing relationship with before for the folks that came onto this podcast. And so it was a delight to have you on today, and really appreciate you sharing your journey to where Bluebird Hardwater is these days. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm glad. Hopefully I can help some entrepreneurs streamline stuff a little faster and avoid mistakes. But yeah, it was great to talk about it and go through that whole startup phase again.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks, Will. Thank you for listening to Spilled Salt. I'm your host, Maureen Ballatori. Spilled Salt is an Agency 29 production. Agency 29 is a brand building firm for food, beverage, and agriculture brands. Learn more at agency29.com. For more information about the podcast, visit spilledsaltpodcast.com. Use that website to send me questions or recommendations for future guests. I always love hearing from you. Spilled Salt is available anywhere you enjoy your podcasts. Please like and subscribe so you never miss an episode.